After a whole day of house hunting, this guy finally found his dream home. But just then, an angry shout came from outside the door. It turned out this was a zoo on the brink of closing down. The real estate agent told them if they wanted to become the new owners of this house, they had to promise to take care of all the animals here. There were a total of 47 species of animals here, including 7 endangered ones. Faced with such a huge responsibility and risk, though Benjamin really liked the house, he had to give up. But just as he turned to leave, he suddenly realized that his daughter Rosie was missing. Panic instantly enveloped Benjamin, and he hurriedly searched everywhere. When he ran to a high platform, he was moved by the scene before him. His daughter was gently feeding some beautiful peacocks with the crackers in her hand. Seeing her innocent smile, Benjamin felt the sadness that had weighed on him for so long start to lift. Right then, he made a bold decision. He would buy this zoo. For the past 7 months, the family had been living in grief after his wife's passing. Benjamin couldn't focus on work, and every familiar view in town would stir up memories of her, making his pain even worse. His teenage son Dylan was handling his mother's death even more poorly. He'd given up on himself, skipped classes, got into stealing, and was eventually expelled. Whenever father and son were together, it felt like a powder keg ready to explode. They'd end up in huge arguments no matter where they were. Communication between them was almost impossible. Benjamin's brother advised him to start fresh with someone new. After all, he was a handsome, stable guy who was never short on admirers. Women would even bring him food, nearly stuffing his fridge to the brim. But his heart was still with his late wife, and he just couldn't open up to anyone else yet. He even went out of his way to avoid the cafe where they'd first met. Thankfully, he had a sweet and understanding daughter at home. Every time she saw him looking down, Rosie would make him sandwiches just like her mom used to. Her bright smile brought Benjamin some comfort, easing the sadness in his heart. But their current environment wasn't ideal either. Neighbors loved throwing loud parties late into the night, making it hard for Rosie to get a good night's sleep. And his son's sketchbook was filled with nothing but darkness. Benjamin knew they needed a fresh start, so he decided to buy the zoo. The next day, he shared his plan with Dylan. His son was furious, shouting that his friends and his life were here, and he didn't want to move to the middle of nowhere. But the child's opinion could not sway the adult's decision. In the end, the family still packed up and left their old home. When they arrived at the zoo, 5 staff members were waiting for them at the entrance. Kelly, the team leader, welcomed them. She'd been a zookeeper for many years. The others were also top-notch in the field. Among these staff members, the youngest was Kelly's cousin Lily, a 13-year-old girl. Maybe because they were close in age, Lily seemed really interested in Dylan. She'd sneak glances at him and give him shy smiles, making him feel a bit embarrassed. Kelly, with a hint of concern, gave Benjamin a quick rundown of the zoo's current state. A bear was suffering from depression and needed timely treatment, and an elderly Bengal tiger was nearing the end of its life. Plus, many facilities were outdated and posed safety risks. These repairs would obviously require a large amount of funding. But Benjamin stayed calm and promised he'd take care of everything. Seeing his attitude, Kelly realized Benjamin knew little about running a zoo, so she voiced her concerns. If he knew nothing about this field, why did he buy the zoo? She explained that the zoo used to have 3 times as many staff. Now, only she and 3 others remained, all volunteering out of love for the job and commitment to caring for the animals, despite not having been paid in ages. They stayed in hopes of finding someone who could bring new life to the zoo. They didn't want someone to buy it on a whim and ultimately lead to its closure. Facing Kelly's doubts, Benjamin responded casually. After taking over the zoo, Benjamin was overwhelmed with endless bills. To save on expenses, he decided to pitch in and do some of the work himself. He quickly formed a good relationship with the management team. Although Benjamin's brother had previously tried to stop him from buying the zoo, he now came over to help. However, he didn't do much work, offering plenty of useless suggestions instead. He said that Benjamin should get rid of the useless animals and keep only Kelly, that he thought was the key to Benjamin's path to happiness. But Benjamin replied that he was doing all of this for the kids, to help Rosie and Dylan heal their inner wounds through their connection with nature. Benjamin had thought that moving here would help Dylan change his mood. However, after moving, Dylan could hardly sleep at night, often curling up alone in a deserted corner, continuing to draw his dark paintings. One day, the lively Lily took the initiative to find him with food. Faced with Lily's enthusiastic concern, Dylan still acted very indifferently. The more Lily tried to get close, the more awkward he felt. At first, he thought Lily would dislike his artwork, but to his surprise, she said she liked it. though she felt it was too dark and lacked sunshine. Dylan simply replied that there was no sunshine in the underworld. However, Lily's radiant smile, brighter than the sun, opened a crack in Dylan's closed heart. Before leaving, Lily said she would come by every day at 4:15 p.m. to bring him sandwiches. Dylan pretended not to care, but after she left, he found himself staring in the direction she had gone for a long time. From then on, Dylan began to look forward to 4:15 p.m. every day. Not only would Lily bring him sandwiches and food, but she also brought him drawings of the sun. Slowly, the color started to appear in his own artwork. Meanwhile, Benjamin was overwhelmed with the endless bills handed to him by the accountant. To cover the zoo's essential expenses, he had no choice but to sign check after check, and then max out his credit cards. Both physically and mentally, he was under a lot of stress. One evening, after he finally had a moment to rest, he noticed Kelly was still working late and kindly told her to go home, saying he could finish the remaining work. Despite the late hour, Benjamin still took his daughter Rosie to give medicine to the tiger. The tiger was in very poor condition, with the vet saying its organs were failing, and the best course of action was euthanasia. Rosie seemed to sense the tiger's pain. Yet, Benjamin couldn't bring himself to give up on the tiger, much like he couldn't let go of his late wife. At that moment, Rosie seemed to notice the sadness on her father's face. Benjamin realized that even his daughter understood his son better than he did. Just before bed, Rosie suddenly asked Benjamin if her mom had suffered as much as the tiger before she left them. Benjamin knew that Rosie was missing her mother. He gently asked her if she felt like she couldn't see or hear her mom anymore. At that moment, Dylan quietly stood outside the door, gently wiping away his tears. Just like Rosie, he missed his mother deeply, but he was too defensive to express this feeling to anyone. The next day, while they were still working on repairing the zoo, the inspector, who was supposed to arrive next month, showed up for a surprise visit. He had once worked at the zoo and secretly had feelings for Kelly. However, Kelly, still caring deeply for the zoo, refused to leave, and this sparked the inspector's jealousy. In an attempt to make the zoo fail, he began to impose unreasonable demands, listing 12 areas that needed immediate correction. The staff roughly estimated that if they were to follow the inspector's demands, it would cost them nearly $20,000. At hearing this, the pressure that had been building up on Benjamin finally became too much for him. In frustration, he kicked over a nearby wooden barrel. Everyone thought he was ready to give up, but to their surprise, he just muttered a few curses and quickly set the barrel back upright. He then gave them an "it's fine" gesture. Benjamin's terrible financial situation started about a month ago when he impulsively bought this failing zoo. He had hoped it would give his family a fresh start, a chance for his two kids, Dylan and Rosie, to heal from the loss of their mother and to experience a more authentic American life. And in some ways, it had worked. Rosie had fun with the animals, and even Dylan, who'd become rebellious and withdrawn after his mom's death, started to lighten up, especially after meeting a girl named Lily. As for Benjamin, the zoo's constant demands kept him busy enough to momentarily set aside his grief. But reviving a nearly bankrupt zoo and making it profitable was no easy task. The place had become a bottomless pit, eating up all of his savings. No one understood Benjamin's finances better than the zoo's accountant. She warned everyone not to pin their hopes on him saving the zoo, as he'd likely sell it off soon and walk away. Hearing this, Lily was devastated. She went to find Dylan to see if the rumor was true. Dylan's attitude left Lily, who had a crush on him, feeling deeply disappointed. She never expected him to show no reluctance about leaving, and her heart, once filled with enthusiasm, now felt as though it had been doused with cold water. Meanwhile, Benjamin, who was struggling with financial stress, put on a hoodie his late wife had bought him, hoping it would give him some strength. To his surprise, he found a deposit box ticket in the pocket. It turned out that his wife had left him an adventure fund of over $80,000. Knowing he loved taking on challenges, she had set this money aside as his last safety net. When Benjamin's brother found out, he immediately urged him to give up on the zoo and use the money to start over. But his wife had thought of everything. In the note she left, she'd added a condition: follow your own heart, not your brother's advice. With that, his brother had nothing more to say. The zoo staff, who had expected Benjamin to give up, were surprised and cheered when he announced that he'd decided to invest the entire $80,000 into fixing up the zoo. Together, they worked hard, and the zoo began improving day by day. Reopening in summer now seemed possible. One day, while Benjamin was shopping with Rosie, the cashier recognized them as the new owners of the zoo and immediately pre-ordered 9 tickets. It seemed the zoo still held a special place in the hearts of the locals, and this small gesture boosted Benjamin's confidence in its potential success. However, things were going downhill for Dylan. At 4:15 every afternoon, Lily used to bring him a sandwich, but now, no matter how many times he checked the clock, Lily didn't show up. Meanwhile, one of the zoo's oldest tigers, who had been severely ill, was also worsening. The tiger had stopped eating fresh food and hardly ever got up to move. From her experience, Kelly knew it was time to end the tiger's suffering, but Benjamin wasn't ready to give up. He wanted to save the tiger, just as he was reluctant to let go of his late wife. Kelly, however, knew that trying to prolong the tiger's life would only add to its suffering. In the end, they couldn't reach an agreement and parted on bad terms. Late at night, Benjamin opened the photo album that held memories of his wife. He stared at the screen, hesitating for a long time, but in the end, he couldn't bring himself to relive those beautiful moments. The tiger reminded Benjamin so much of his late wife. He couldn't bear to go through another painful goodbye. That night, he and Kelly talked for hours, reminiscing about the familiar streets and memories of his past life with his wife. He'd thought that leaving their old surroundings would allow for a fresh start, but no matter where he went, memories of his wife lingered, especially whenever he looked at Dylan, who had her eyes. But unlike his wife's, in Dylan's eyes, he saw no lightness, only disappointment and defeat. It was this look that often triggered Benjamin's anger toward him. Unbeknownst to him, Dylan overheard the entire conversation from inside the house. Another argument erupted between father and son. Dylan accused Benjamin of never caring about him and of resenting him because he had his mother's eyes. Benjamin dismissed it as Dylan throwing a tantrum, insisting he shouldn't sit around feeling sorry for himself all day. Benjamin reminded him that it wasn't his fault his friends hadn't visited him here. He'd even called all of Dylan's friends himself, inviting them over. Why couldn't Dylan just grow up, act like the big brother he was, and take responsibility for looking after his sister? At that moment, Benjamin realized that, over the years, he hadn't truly paid attention to his son. After their argument, both father and son took some time to reflect on their feelings. Benjamin sat by the tiger's enclosure, keeping vigil throughout the night. He was still torn about whether to euthanize the tiger. Just then, Dylan walked in quietly and sat beside him. For the first time, they had the chance to sit down and talk heart to heart. Benjamin asked him about his relationship with Lily. Dylan admitted that he really liked her but always felt awkward around her. Benjamin smiled and told him that all he needed was 20 seconds of insane courage. If he could push through the awkwardness of those 20 seconds, he would likely experience something unexpectedly beautiful. Dylan let out a deep sigh, finally feeling a sense of relief. This was the first time they had a calm and meaningful conversation. When they left the tiger's enclosure, it felt as though the distance between them had finally disappeared. They had opened up to each other, and their relationship was no longer strained. That evening, as Benjamin tucked Dylan in, he noticed that Dylan's drawings had changed. They were no longer dark and somber but had transformed into cute pictures of animals. Benjamin realized that his son was finally starting to heal from the loss of his mother. Finally, Benjamin mustered the courage to open the photo album. The memories of his wife, which he had locked away in the deepest part of his heart, rushed back like scenes from a movie. All the memories he had once been afraid to revisit flooded his mind, and before he knew it, Benjamin's eyes filled with tears. Despite the sorrow, he understood that the living must keep moving forward. He followed Kelly's advice and decided to euthanize the tiger. Although the tiger has left this world, that day, the peacock chicks Rosie had been waiting for finally hatched from their egg. Benjamin made a logo for the zoo using Dylan's drawing of the tiger's face and printed it on promotional flyers. Even his brother, who had never supported the zoo idea, showed up with a large box of cod, the bear's favorite treat. Watching his space expand and receiving his favorite treats from time to time, the grizzly bear's depression had improved significantly. On the day of the inspection, everyone was on high alert, ready to welcome the inspector. Despite his meticulous and strict examination, he couldn't find a single flaw and had no choice but to approve their inspection. This meant the zoo could officially open. Everyone cheered with joy when they received the good news. Everything was in place, and they only had to wait for the grand opening. However, just as they were about to celebrate, an unexpected turn of events occurred. A once-in-a-century rainstorm suddenly hit, and if it continued, it would directly affect the zoo's opening on July 7th. The team was filled with worry, praying every day for the rain to stop. One day, as Dylan passed by Lily's room, he saw a sign on the door that read, "If you love me, please let me know." He suddenly remembered the 20 seconds of insane courage his father had told him about. Without hesitation, he ran to Lily's window, regardless of the heavy rain, and knocked on it. When Lily opened the window, he poured out all his feelings and thoughts. Those 20 seconds of insane courage allowed them both to realize their mutual love. Miraculously, the rain stopped on the day of the opening. Full of excitement, they cut the ribbon for the zoo. However, after waiting for a long time, not a single person showed up. As everyone grew anxious, Dylan suddenly realized that the storm might have caused some disruptions along the way. Sure enough, the path to the zoo was blocked by a large fallen tree. After climbing over it, they were thrilled to see a long line of visitors waiting outside. Benjamin and Kelly, busy greeting the guests, found that all the tickets they had prepared sold out in one day. They had to use tickets for the next month to accommodate the crowd. At this moment, Kelly suddenly confessed her feeling. 20 seconds of insane courage applies to everyone. All you need to do is be brave and leave the rest to fate. Benjamin finally found the courage to return to the cafe, the place where he first met his wife. On the day they met, he had just glanced over and saw the most beautiful woman he'd ever seen in his life. But he had never struck up a conversation with a stranger before. In that moment, with 20 seconds of insane courage, he walked into the cafe and started a conversation. And with that, the movie comes to an end. We Bought a Zoo is a film based on a true story, with its origins at the Dartmoor Zoo in the UK. I always remembered We Bought a Zoo as just a simple comfort movie, but watching it again this time, I was really moved by the relationship between Benjamin and Dylan, especially how both of them, dealing with the same trauma and pain, are unable to comfort each other. It makes you think a lot. Feel free to share your thoughts on the movie in the comments section. See you in the next movie.